the man himself.
Yo! Hard at work for all of you.
This is as close as I'm getting to him.
Too far away.
This is the distance that I would normally be from him anyway, so
Not a big deal.
nothing's changed. All right, so guys, today we're gonna go over the deadlift. All right, we're gonna do a little deadlift 101. As I mentioned, each week for the next few weeks on Tuesdays, I'll be doing a tutorial. So tell me what you want to see. It may be squatting, maybe deadlifting, maybe benching. Let me know what you want to see, and I will make it happen. All right, so today I'm going to go over the conventional deadlift and the sumo deadlift. They are different, but they are very similar as well. So we're going to break this down into 3 parts. I want to show you what we're going to do. We're going to go over the warm-up, proper warm-up, what to warm up, how to warm up. Then we're going to go over our setup. We're going to go over the setup for both conventional and sumo. And then we're going to go over execution, what you should be doing while you are lifting the bar. It's not just as simple, although we think, as just picking something up off the floor. It's never that simple. I think when you first start deadlifting, that's what we all think about. The first thing that goes through our mind is, holy crap, there is a bar on the floor loaded with a bunch of weight that is potentially more than my body weight. So what do I need to do to get this thing off the floor safely without dying? And we kind of go into like a fight or flight mode where we just use our aggression, right? Our hormones kick, or our adrenaline kicks in, and we just rip the thing off the floor. And that'll get you a little bit, that'll get you a ways, but after time, that'll lead to either a stagnation in your progress or injury. So I'm here to show you the way, all right, to a big, safe deadlift. So thank you guys for joining in. First thing we're going to go over, the warm-up. Now, just like I talked about in our bench press, there are many muscle groups that we want to make sure are warmed up and ready to go before we lift. For the deadlift specifically, it's a very hip-dominant movement. So we want to make sure that the hip joint and the glutes are warmed up and ready to go. We also want to make sure that our legs are ready. That includes our hamstrings, our quads, even our calf muscles. They do a really good job of stabilizing us into the floor, staying grounded with the floor. And then, of course, our lats and our back, specifically our upper back, because that's something that keeps us in a good, strong position throughout the entirety of the movement. So with our warm-up, when we warm up the hips or the glutes, you can do this multiple ways. This is something that CJ and I and Jared were talking about the other day. This is something that shouldn't take you all session, right? You don't want to spend 30 minutes getting warmed up. If for some reason you have pre-existing injuries or you have abnormally tight muscles, then you can take a little bit longer, but at the same time, those are some things that you should be working on at home, or if you go to a physical therapist, things like that. When you come in the gym, you only want to have to do as much as you need to do in order to get lifting and be warmed up and ready to go. So you want to take about 15 minutes. I think is a good amount of time, 10, 15 minutes to get everything firing. So with your hips and your glutes and your whole lower body, we'll start with that. You can do something like the leg press, right? You can jump on a leg press. You don't even need any weight. Or you could throw bands on there or very lightweight. And you can do, 2 to 3 sets of anywhere from 10 to 20 repetitions to get the legs warmed up. Something about the leg press, it relates directly to the movement of the deadlift, right? So when you're pushing that platform away from you, that's how you want to think about pushing through the floor when you deadlift. So it would be a great exercise to use as an initial warm-up. But as far as the individual muscles of the lower body, you could do things like glute bridges, right? Because we're extending at the hip when we deadlift. So glute bridges in the double leg or single leg variation. You could even do leg curls, leg extensions on a machine to warm up the quads and hamstrings. I go as far sometimes, if my calf muscles are really tight, I'll go as far as doing calf raises just to get everything warmed up. So whatever you need to do for the lower body, but make sure you got your hips warmed up, you got your glutes warmed up, hamstrings, quads, they're all firing. So next, the lats and the upper back. Very overlooked area, but play a huge role in your deadlift. Your lats are what's going to stabilize and lock in your posture for your whole upper body when you're deadlifting. So we want to do something that mimics that. So you could do like a lat pull down, like a wide grip pull down. I specifically like to relate it to something that I do when I deadlift as far as like a cue. So one thing is let me set you guys up, a straight arm pull down. This is something that you can do on a cable machine. So we're just going to get a wide grip handle. Doesn't take a lot of weight. So what we want to think about doing, and this is what we think about when we deadlift, is we're using our lats not so much to squeeze the shoulders back, but to pull the shoulders down. So what we would do here, forward at the waist, back flat, and then we would keep the arms straight, pull the weight down, and pull our chest up at the same time. Now, obviously, this isn't quite the position that we want to be in when we're at the top of a deadlift. I'm a little bit too overarched, right? So I can get neutral. There we go. And what we want to do, pull the lats down into our back pockets as we simultaneously pull the chest up. This right here, the tension that I have in my lats, is what we want to feel when we deadlift, right? So I'm pulling the bar close to my body. I'm keeping my chest up and I'm keeping my lats engaged. That's one of my favorite as far as engaging the upper back. So again, your warm-up does not have to be time consuming, but just take 10, 15 minutes. Make sure you're getting all these muscles firing that you're going to use for the movement. So let me turn you guys back around. Now we're going to go into proper setup. So one thing that we want to focus on is our stance, our width, our stance width, and our shin placement, how close we are to the bar. Then we want to focus on getting down to the bar, setting our hips and our head. So that pretty much will round everything out. If we do those 4 things correctly, then we will be set up for a really good deadlift. So let me set you guys up. All right. I'm being special today, using the kilo plates. Just want to feel cool. So, first thing, bar placement or stance shin placement. We want to make sure that when we walk up to a bar, that our feet are in the correct place. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that. Mainly how we're built. A wider individual, somebody who's bigger frame, is going to be much wider, typically. Somebody who's a little bit thinner, narrower shoulders, is going to be a little bit more narrow with their stance. A good way to judge is to hang from a pull-up bar, completely relaxed, no tension, let yourself fall, and wherever your feet typically land, that's your width for conventional deadlift, right? And I've done that with a lot of people, and that actually is very accurate. So that's the one that I would recommend. The other one is, if you're going to go jump, like if you're trying to dunk a basketball or do a vertical jump, what would your stance be? Typically, it wouldn't be this close, right? And again, this is for conventional. Typically, it would be something along these lines, right? Kind of a power position. So that's a good way to judge. So with your conventional deadlift, you want to walk up to the bar in that stance. Typically, it's shoulder width apart. Now, we also want to get close to the bar. We don't want to be all the way touching it most of the time, but we also don't want to be a foot back from it. And that's because when we go down and grab this bar, the farther that bar is out in front of us, the more it's going to kick us out in a compromised position when we go to lift it up off the floor. So we have to make sure that we're keeping the bar close, but we don't want to start so close that when we go down and grab the bar, our shins roll the bar out, kind of just like that did. So when I go down to grab this bar, I don't want to be so close that the bar kicks out in front of me, because then I just undid everything that I just tried to do when I set up. So a good rule of thumb is to put that bar right over top of the tongue of your shoe, or your top lace, the knot. That'll usually get you about an inch or two away from the bar. That way when you go down to grab the bar, it'll be up against your shins, but it'll be nice and close to you and won't be out too far. So that's the one thing just to keep in mind is when you're down, once you have your width, when you go down and grab that bar should be up against your shins. You should physically feel it against your shins. If you don't, if it's out a little far, then you're going to be in a bad spot when you go to lift that bar because your hips are going to rise, you're going to shoot out forward. So when you're down there, just reinforce it by pulling that bar into your shins. All right, so we got stance and foot position, shin position for the conventional deadlift. Now we're going to go into getting down to the bar. The most important thing is to not take too much time up top. Typically what happens, you get your stance, you're ready to go, you're up here, you're taking a bunch of big breaths, and you talk yourself out of the lift, right? It's not like a squat or a bench where the bar is already in your hands and you're ready to go. This bar is waiting for us, right? So the longer we stand up here, the more we keep our mind going and the more we keep talking ourselves out of the lift. So the best thing to do, get your stance, take a couple deep breaths, commit, go down to the bar, set your grip, and then go. When you go down to the bar, you want to try to be in an already similar position to where you're going to deadlift. What I mean by that is, I don't want to bend down to the bar like this, because this is not a good position, and it's also going to be harder for me to get tight and build tension going from this position to this position. It's just a lot to overcome. So when we go down to the bar, we want to try to relate the position that we want to be in when we go to pull. Now I can get much tighter, much easier in that position. So that's what I mean when I say get to the bar. We want to make sure, I missed this one, our hand width, our grip width, all right? For the conventional deadlift, our hands are going to go outside of our legs, but we want to keep the arm as close to the legs as possible. So when we go to grab the bar, I don't want to have my arms way out here because that's putting me into a deficit. We want to be as tall as possible when we're in the starting position. So when we grab that bar, the closer I can get my hands, the taller I can be with my chest. But if I bring my hands in too close, what that does is that closes me off. It actually rounds my shoulders in, and it actually caves, it makes me kind of push my knees in, which puts us in it's not a power position. We're not strong in that position. We need to be open. We need to be open through the chest and through the hips. So when we go down to the bar, hands should be outside of the shins, and then arms should be outside of the legs, probably right up against them, but not closing us off. All right, so that right there is going to be our starting position. Now we have our head position. Some people look up, some people look straight down, some people look straight out. Our body's going to tend to follow where our head is, for the most part. If I'm looking straight down, my chest is going to want to stay down. If I'm looking straight up, that doesn't necessarily mean that my chest is going to follow, because I could be looking up, but notice my chest is down. But if I look straight out and put my head in a neutral position and tuck it back, it actually pulls your chest up. So your ideal head position should be out in front of you, and that's where your eyes should be. Not necessarily up, not down, but kind of straight out in front of you. That right there will get you your ideal starting position. Now your hips, notice my hips aren't all the way down. My hips also should not be as high as my shoulders, right? My hips should be high so we're not squatting away. If my hips are too low, then what's going to happen when I go to deadlift is my hips are going to shoot up before the bar actually leaves the floor. So we want to start with our hips in a high position so that when I go to deadlift, it's one movement. All right, it doesn't become a two-part movement. So with our setup, just to recap, we want to get our stance width. We also want to get our shin placement. Then we want to focus on getting down to the bar, grabbing the bar in the correct position, and then setting our hip height, and then our head position. And that's our setup. Now, we'll switch to sumo real quick, because they're not that much different. The only thing is, with the sumo, you're going to be much wider. All right, your feet are going to be very wide. Your hands are going to be almost straight underneath them. Now, the width for this is also going to depend on the person. Somebody who's shorter, has shorter legs, is not going to be as wide as somebody that has longer legs for the most part. Your feet should be 45 degrees, roughly, right? This also depends on your hip anatomy. So if your hips are kind of, if the socket is more towards the front of the hip, then you're not going to be able to open up quite as much. So take that into account as well. But for the most part, 45 degrees pointing out. Your knees, you want them driving out the whole time. You don't want the knees tracking forward. All right. In order to use the glutes and the hips, we have to externally rotate. Think about twisting into the floor, driving out. So once we get our stance, all right, we're going to, same thing, get to the bar. That's what we're going to do. So we want to get to the bar, for the most part, in the position that we want to pull in. Our hands are going to be index fingers right where the knurling and the smooth part of the bar meet. Rule of thumb. Of course, some people who are wider are going to be wider. Some people who are a little bit narrow will typically be more narrow. But keep in mind that there's no knurling there. It's smooth. So you want to always grab the ball and knurling. So wide stance, drive the knees out, get to the bar, get your hips in the right position, get your head in the right position, and you should typically be ready to go. All right. So not really all that different, right? The setup is the same. It's just a different stance. So now let's go over and we're going to talk about execution. How to get the bar from A to B. Now, of course, I'm starting this as if we're already in the perfect setup. So first thing we want to do, if we're wearing a belt, fill our belt or fill our midsection, brace, whatever you want to call it. But when we take our breath, it should not be up into the shoulders or up into the chest. So if you take a breath right before you go to lift and this happens, you're not filling your midsection. You're not bracing. You're not connecting your upper body to your lower body. What we want to see, don't make fun of me here, is when we take a breath, the shoulders should not rise. We fill the diaphragm, right? All the air should go down. Push it down and out. Expand out, abs, obliques, and even into the lower back. That's how we brace. That's how we neutralize and stabilize the spine. And that's how we just keep the body locked in throughout the entirety of the lift. So we want to start by filling the belt, taking our breath. Then we want to lock in our lats, drive through the floor, pull the bar into us, and then we're going to finish. So first, we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, if I can get this thing set up right, filling our belt. Now, that's typically going to happen when we're at the bottom of the lift, all right, in the starting position. Some people will do it up here. The thing is, whenever you take that air, you got to keep it locked in. So if you're going to take your air at the top, that means you got a lot of time between when you take your air and when you finish the lift. And when it comes to lifting as much as possible, you want to be conservative with your air. So I would recommend getting in position, getting everything in the same position, in the position that you want to be, head position, hips, knees, and then fill your belt. All right, right before you get ready to go. But don't rush it. Take the time, get your air, lock it in, wait a second, and then go. Don't try to do it simultaneously because then you're relying too much on timing to be in a good position. So fill your belt, step one. Next, and these two things kind of overlap. So don't think of them as two separate steps, think of them as just one together. Fill your belt and lock your lats. So what we're going to do, we're going to get into position, fill the belt, and then we're going to lock our lats. All right. Notice that it was kind of something that I did with the warm up with the straight arm pull down. All we're doing is pulling the lats down into our back pocket and pulling the chest up. That's going to just reinforce that starting position. All right. So hand position, hip position, head position. Fill the belt, lock your lats down, pull the chest up, and then you'll be ready to go. One thing that I did right there is I pulled the slack out of the bar. If you can hear this noise, what that's doing, that's called the slack in the bar. You won't notice it so much with lighter weight, but as the weight gets heavy, if you don't pull that slack out before you go to lift, it's going to kick in as soon as you go to pull the bar. So if you didn't have the slack pulled out, it would look something like this. There's my hip shot up, the bar didn't move. If we pull the slack out by locking our lats, that tension's going to be out, and then it's going to be one movement straight up. So it'll be hip position, head position, fill the belt, lock the lats, and pull the slack out. That's our starting position. Now when I go, it's just one movement. All right, so that's what we mean when we say lock the lats and pull the slack out of the bar. Now we're going to go to driving through the floor. We think of the deadlift as a pull, right? Pulling the bar off the floor. That only gets you so far because pulling the bar off the floor means that it would be typically like a lower back movement, right? But in order to get the most out of it, we have to drive through the floor. Think about pushing the floor away from us. Just as when you do a push-up, you push yourself away from the floor, push the floor away from you. So with the deadlift, we don't want to think about pulling because typically this is how we end up, right? We try to pull something off the floor. And when we're driving through the floor, it's a compromise between pull and push. So we're getting set up in our position, we're ready to go, we're filling the belt, pulling the slack out. We're going to push ourselves away from the floor and pull our chest up. All right, so you're not thinking about pulling the bar up, you're thinking about pulling your chest up. So push through the floor, pull yourself up, turn yourself into a lever, a catapult. So always remember that. That's one of the biggest cues that stuck with me was drive through the floor, push through the floor. Also, pull the bar close to you. It's easy when we have that bar loaded up to let it drift away from us. Remember, if we're in a good position, that bar is up against our shins. So when we go to push through the floor and pull our chest up, we should also be pulling the bar as close to us as possible. Don't let it drift away because that's going to get us way out over the bar. So drive through the floor, pull your chest up, pull the bar into it. That's going to create that tension throughout the whole body and keep it there throughout the entirety of the lift. Last thing we're going to go over, finish the lift. This is something that I see done incorrectly a lot. When we finish the lift, we want to stand tall. Now we don't have to over-exaggerate, right? We don't have to be locked out like this. But when we finish, we don't want to be forward, right? We don't want to have a subpar finish. We should have our glutes and our hips into the bar and our chest up and our shoulders back. We want to stand tall. That also comes with intent, having intent throughout the lift. So we want to start not slow, we want to be aggressive. So when we're in our position, we got our setup. When we drive the bar, we're accelerating, right? It's gas pedal. And it's not let up on the gas pedal once we get here because we think we're gonna lock it out. It's gas pedal all the way throughout the top. All right, so it shouldn't be gas and then slow, slow, slow finish. It should be gas all the way, finish, stand, pull. And that's what we mean by finish the lift and having intent with the lift. So just to recap, your warm-up should consist of exercises for your hips, glutes, hamstrings, quads, and your lats and upper back. Make sure they're ready to go, 10, 15 minutes. Your setup, find your stance and your shin placement in relation to the bar. Get your mind right, take a couple breaths, get down to the bar, don't waste time. Set your hips, your head, and then you'll be in your perfect position. Back nice and flat. And then with your execution, fill that belt while locking those lats in and pulling the slack out of the bar. Drive through the floor and pull the bar through your body and then gas pedal down to finish that lift strong. So guys, thanks for tuning in. That was our Deadlift 101 to go along with our Bench 101 from last week. Next Tuesday, we're gonna do a squat session, all right? So bring your questions. Also, anything else that you wanna see, you tune in, let me know, send us a message, and we'll fire it up. But from Union Fitness, we hope to see you guys soon. Take care.